There are men who are rich in money and poor in everything else. Kang Jae-min was one of them. He had buildings that touched the sky, contracts worth more than most people would earn in 3 lifetimes, a name that made grown men straighten their ties just hearing it in a hallway. But at 11:53 on a Tuesday night, all of that meant absolutely nothing. Because the woman who used to wait up for him, the one who left the kitchen light on even when she was angry, even when he'd broken another promise, even when the dinner had gone cold for the 3rd time that month, that woman walked out of his front door, alone, into the dark. And he let her go. He told himself she just needed air, that she'd be back before midnight, that they'd fought before and always found their way back to each other by morning. He told himself all the things a man tells himself when he's too proud to chase her, and too blind to see that this time was different. She had no coat, no phone charger, and somewhere in the pocket of the bag she grabbed in anger. Her insulin was sitting on the kitchen counter, right next to the anniversary card he hadn't even opened yet. Han Yura made it 4 blocks before her legs gave out. She sat down on a bench in a park that had no cameras, no foot traffic, no one passing through at that hour. She tried to call him. The phone rang out. She tried again. Voicemail. By the time anyone found her, it was already too late. And Kang Jae-min? He was still in his penthouse, jacket still on, tie still tight, waiting for the sound of the door opening. It never did. That night didn't just take his wife from him. It took everything he thought he was, stripped him down to the bones of a man who had optimized every corner of his life and forgotten to protect the only thing that actually mattered. For 3 years after that, he didn't grieve. He punished himself. And the silence in that house? He wore it like it was exactly what he deserved. The penthouse sat 62 floors above Seoul, and it felt like the loneliest place on earth. Floor-to-ceiling glass on every wall. The city spread out below like a living painting. A million lights, a million heartbeats, a million people going home to someone. The marble floors were so cold, they pulled the warmth right out of you the moment your feet touched them. Everything in that space was chosen by an interior designer who charged more per hour than most people earned in a week. Everything polished, precise, untouchable, and completely, devastatingly empty. That was Kang Jae-min's world before her. Then Han Yura walked into it, and the whole temperature changed. She was soft where his life was sharp, warm where everything around him ran cold. She laughed at things he didn't even notice were funny. And somehow, hearing her laugh made him notice too. She had this way of fixing his tie in the morning, both hands on his collar, eyes focused like it was the most important task in the world. And for those 10 seconds, he actually believed it was. She waited for him, night after night. Late dinners gone cold, eyes heavy with sleep but never quite closing, because she refused to let the day end without seeing his face. She teased him about his work like it was a rival she'd already decided to outlast. She didn't fight his walls. She simply lived inside them, like light. And the tragedy of Kang Jae-min was that he only understood what that meant after the light went out. She wasn't screaming. That was the thing nobody tells you about the arguments that actually destroy you. They don't always come with raised voices and slammed doors. Sometimes they come quietly, slowly, like water wearing down stone over years until one night. The stone just gives. Yura stood in the kitchen in a dress he hadn't even noticed until that moment. Pale cream. The kind she only wore when something mattered to her. She'd gotten dressed up for him, for them, And he had walked through the front door 40 minutes late with his phone still in his hand and an apology that didn't even have the decency to sound sorry. She looked at him for a long moment. Not angry. Something worse than angry. Tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from one night. The kind that builds quietly behind a woman's eyes over months of waiting, forgiving, waiting again. Until one evening, she looks at the man she loves and realizes she's been alone inside this marriage for a very long time. The words they exchanged weren't loud, but every pause between sentences landed like something breaking. And then she picked up her bag. He watched her move toward the door and told himself she just needed a moment, that she'd reach the elevator, press the button, change her mind. He stood completely still, a man who had negotiated billion-dollar deals without blinking, completely paralyzed by the sight of his wife walking away. Her hand touched the door handle, and something in his chest screamed at him, "Move. Say something." Touch her wrist, just lightly, just enough. He didn't move. The door closed behind her with barely a sound, and in the silence that followed, regret arrived. Not slowly, not gently, all at once, like a door slamming shut inside him that he somehow knew would never fully open again. The park was empty, just the sound of wind moving through trees that didn't care, streetlights casting pale gold across the pavement, and Han Yura sitting on a bench that nobody had chosen to sit on in years in a city of 11 million people. Completely alone, her breathing had gone shallow, the kind of shallow that the body does when it is working too hard to keep up with what the mind refuses to accept. She reached for her phone one more time. It rang and went silent. Her hand dropped slowly into her lap. The pendant around her neck, the one Jae-min had given her on their first anniversary, silver with a single engraved character meaning forever, caught the light from the street lamp above her. Just for a moment, just long enough, and then her eyes closed. The world didn't end loudly. It ended quietly, in the space between one heartbeat and the next. No one heard it happen. No one was passing through. The city kept moving, taxis and neon signs and restaurants full of noise, completely unaware that somewhere in a forgotten corner of a park, a woman who deserved so much more had simply run out of time. They called him at 2:47 in the morning. He identified her body in a room that smelled of disinfectant and fluorescent light. She was lying perfectly still, face calm, hands folded. She looked like she was simply waiting, like any moment she would open her eyes and say his name the way she always did, softly, with that trace of warmth she kept specifically for him. She didn't. He stood there for a long time, not crying, not speaking, just standing with the specific stillness of a man whose entire internal world has just collapsed and hasn't yet figured out how to exist inside the wreckage. The doctor said something to him. He nodded. He didn't hear a single word. He drove home alone, took the elevator up 62 floors, walked into the penthouse, and sat down on the kitchen floor in his full suit, and stayed there until morning. The first year, he refused to believe it was permanent. He kept her things exactly where she left them. Her reading glasses on the nightstand, her handwriting on the grocery list still stuck to the refrigerator, her perfume on the bathroom shelf, untouched, cap still on, because opening it felt like an ending he wasn't ready to authorize. He moved through each day like a man waiting for a mistake to be corrected, like grief was a temporary condition, and reality would eventually apologize and give her back. It didn't. The second year was punishment. He stopped sleeping properly, started taking calls at midnight, filled every hour with decisions and contracts and problems that belonged to other people, because his own felt too enormous to look at directly. He worked like a man trying to outrun something he knew he could never outrun. And every night, when the building went quiet and there was nothing left to do, he sat in the silence and let it take pieces of him. That was the point. He wanted it to take pieces. He felt he owed it that much. The third year was something quieter and more dangerous than either of the first two. Emptiness. Not the sharp kind, the flat kind. The kind that doesn't hurt anymore because there isn't enough feeling left to manufacture pain. He functioned. He performed. He built 3 new developments, expanded into 2 new markets, appeared on the covers of magazines that called him visionary and relentless and extraordinary. Inside, he was a room with all the furniture removed. He built an empire during the day and dismantled himself every night. Every morning, without exception, he made 2 cups of coffee. He never questioned it, never caught himself, and stopped. His hands just did it, reached for the second cup automatically, the way they had for 7 years of marriage. He would set it on her side of the kitchen counter, let it go cold, pour it out, and start his day. He slept on his side of the bed, always. The other side remained untouched, pillow undisturbed, covers smooth, a space held open by a habit that grief had never managed to break. These were not dramatic gestures. He would never have called them romantic. He would have called them simply what his body did when his mind wasn't paying attention. But they were the most honest love story left in that penthouse. The only proof that somewhere beneath the emptiness, he still knew exactly where she belonged. In the boardroom, Kang Jae-min was a different creature entirely. He walked in, and the room temperature changed. Not metaphorically. People actually sat straighter, spoke more carefully, edited themselves in real time. His silence carried more authority than most men's loudest sentences. His stillness read as power. His restraint read as danger. He had built the kind of presence that money alone cannot buy. The kind forged specifically by a man who has survived something that should have finished him. Men feared him in those rooms. They studied his face for approval and found nothing to read. They watched his hands for signals and got stillness. They pitched to him with rehearsed confidence and left feeling somehow assessed in ways they didn't fully understand. He was extraordinary in every room he entered, and completely, utterly absent from every one of them. Because the man sitting at the head of that table, the one making decisions worth hundreds of millions, the one they wrote profiles about and cited in business schools, that man was not fully present anywhere. He was still, always, in a park, at 2:47 in the morning, wishing he had moved when it mattered. He hadn't wanted to go. His assistant had put it in the calendar 3 weeks in advance. New Year Carnival, downtown Seoul, client relations, and Jaemin had stared at it every day since and considered canceling every single time. He didn't do crowds. He didn't do noise. He especially didn't do celebrations that required him to pretend he had something worth celebrating. But he went, because work was the one language he still spoke fluently. The carnival had taken over 4 city blocks. Lanterns strung between buildings like captured stars. The smell of roasted chestnuts and spiced wine moving through the cold air in warm waves. Music coming from 3 different directions at once. None of it matching, all of it somehow working together. People pressed against each other, laughing too loud. Faces flushed from cold and joy, and the particular electricity that comes from a city deciding, collectively, to feel something. Jaemin stood at the edge of it with his hands in his coat pockets and watched it the way a man watches a fire he doesn't feel entitled to stand close to. And then he saw her. She was standing maybe 30 feet away, head tilted back, laughing at something her friend had just said. A full laugh. The kind that doesn't perform itself. The kind that just happens before the person can decide whether it's appropriate. She was wearing a burnt orange coat that had no business looking that good in that light. Her hair was loose. Her lashes caught the lantern glow every time she turned her head. She had the specific kind of presence that doesn't announce itself. It just exists, quietly magnetic. The kind that makes a crowded space rearrange itself slightly around her without anyone noticing it's happening. Jaemin noticed. He stared longer than was reasonable, longer than was polite. He noticed the way she gestured when she talked. Wide, unself-conscious, completely unbothered by how much space she took up. He noticed the way she stood, grounded, easy, like a woman who had long since made peace with exactly who she was. And something inside him, something that had been completely, deliberately still for 3 years, moved. Not loudly, not dramatically, just shifted. The way a compass needle moves when it finally comes close enough to true north to remember what it's for. He didn't know her name, but he already felt something sharp and irrational at the thought of someone else knowing it before he did. He took 3 steps in her direction, and the crowd closed. One moment she was there, burnt orange coat, that laugh, that presence, and the next, a group of people moved between them, and she was simply gone. He searched for the coat, for the sound of that laugh. He moved through the crowd with more urgency than he'd moved toward anything personal in 3 years, turning corners, scanning faces. Nothing. He stopped in the middle of the carnival, surrounded by 10,000 people, and felt the specific loneliness of a man who had just been reminded that he was still capable of wanting something. Grief had become familiar, a known weight he had learned to carry. But this, losing someone he hadn't even met yet, felt worse in a way he couldn't fully explain, because grief is the absence of what was. And this was the absence of what could be, and somehow that felt more cruel. What happens next? Stay tuned for part 2.